basically, what we're dealing with here is what the Gemara is telling us interesting laws about a difference between a man kohen and a woman kohen, a husband kohen, a wife kohen, and it applies to the Sota and applies to other minchas, carbon minchas. Basically, there's a unique law that a kohen's mincha, when a kohen brings a carbon mincha meal offering, it's totally burned on the altar. That's a special law about a kohen. Now, regular Israelite doesn't have that law. Regular Israelite, you take a kamitza, you take part of it, burned on the altar. The rest is eaten by the kohenim. But the unique law of a kohen is that it's totally burned on the altar. You don't even do a kamitza, which is the 3 fingers full. You don't do that. You just put the whole thing on the altar. It's a special law by a kohen. The question is, what about a kohen's wife? Or what about a female kohen? So the Mishnah told us that a female kohen is similar to an Israelite. That means a daughter of a kohen, she's unmarried, or she was married to a kohen and she's divorced, a widow. She basically has the law of an Israelite. A kohen is different, but a kohenes, a female kohen, is like an Israelite. She's like a non-kohen, and there's no such thing. She koimetz, and that's what the Mishnah said. But what's the case? Kohenes shenisas liyisrael. If she's married to an Israelite, her mincha is necheles. Her mincha is eaten, and even if she's not married to a Israelite, Rashi adds that minchas and necheles. It's only by a kohen that it's totally burned. By a kohenes, if she's married to an Israelite, or if she's an almana or a grusha, she's a almana, or if she's a widow or a divorcee, it's eaten. What about if she's unmarried? It's interesting that Rashi doesn't mention this, but I came to the conclusion that the same law would apply. I'm surprised Rashi doesn't say it. That's what bothered me yesterday. Why doesn't Rashi mention how about if she's how if she's unmarried? She never got married, but it seems that the conclusion is that the same law would apply. The same law applies, that she is bringing a carbon mincha. She's unmarried. She's offering this carbon mincha, and it is similar to an Israelite's kohen carbon. You take a kamitza, and that's it. You take a kamitza, and the rest is eaten by the kohenim. The kohenim get to eat the rest. What do you mean? She's a kohen. She's a daughter of a kohen. Doesn't matter. Daughter of a kohen. It doesn't matter. She is her carbon is it's a special law for a man kohen called minchas kohen kolol tiyeh. Mincha of a kohen, a male kohen. Female kohen is like an Israelite in this regard. I see they don't even talk about it. I'm just surprised Rashi doesn't mention that. There must be a reason why it's so obvious, I guess. I don't know why Rashi doesn't say it. To me, it'd be nice if Rashi added that point in. But in any event, that's the law. Kohenes, a female kohen, her mincha is just like an Israelite's. Whether she's unmarried, whether she's married to an Israelite, or whether she's divorced or widowed, even if she was married to a kohen. Now she's an Israelite. Her mincha is like an Israelite's mincha, and she brings a koimetz of it goes on the altar, and the rest is eaten by the kohenim. Okay. What about if she's married to a kohen? And it doesn't matter if she's the daughter of a kohen herself, or if she's an Israelite, someone who's married to a kohen. What's the law there? So that's where it gets tricky. That's where it gets very tricky. Someone married to a kohen, the Mishnah said, their carbon minchas are burned, but we'll see in the Gemara what that means. So there's a special law about a korban mincha of a woman who, we don't care what sect of Judaism she's part of, what tribe she's part of, doesn't bother us. She's married to a kohen. It carries with it a unique law. And the Mishnah's wording is it gets burned. Her mincha is burned. And this law basically is saying that it's not just a kometz that's burned, it's the entire mincha. But what we do need to keep in mind is that there is going to be a division. There's going to be the kometz that's burned, and there's the rest of the mincha that will be burned. So it's different than the other cases where the entire mincha is burned, different than a kohen. A kohen's entire thing is burned. Here, it's her mincha is burned. How it's done is a little different than the regular way it's done. Now, I hope that didn't put you to sleep, but that's the basic laws that you need to be aware of. And then, of course, the Mishnah got into all these different laws: a kohen, kohenes, an Israelite, a male, a female. And the Mishnah, interestingly, mentions a lot of differences between a male and a female in different laws of the Torah, about a Nazir, about a Metzora, about being Mekadesh, betrothing one's daughter, difference between a father and a mother, between the laws of skila, being stoned, the laws of being hanged, the laws of being sold for person's thievery, for person steals, they don't have money to pay back. So these are special laws that these are special rules that there's a difference between a male or a female that does it. Not, many laws of the Torah doesn't matter male, female, but these laws have differences in their technical rules between the male and the female who transgress or are fulfilling one of these mitzvahs. Now, the Mishnah did not mention a lot of other laws. For example, a father is obligated to circumcise his son. What about a mother? No. A father is obligated to do binyan haben on his son. Mother, no. A father is obligated to, a man is obligated to have children. A mother, a wife is not obligated to have children. It's a mitzvah on the husband, on the man. So these mitzvahs it didn't mention. It also doesn't mention all the time constrained mitzvahs, like the mitzvah of shaking lulav, the mitzvah of blowing shofar. Any mitzvah that's dependent on time, on a certain day, is a positive mitzvah. Women are exempt. Of course, many of them do them; they fulfill them, very nice, but they're exempt from them. And the mitzvah is really on the mitzvah is on only men and not women. So why doesn't it mention those cases in this Mishnah? And seemingly because the Mishnah is not trying to just give us general rules of what men are obligated, what women are obligated. The Mishnah is comparing it because we have a unique case of Sota, that there seems to be differences between a kohen and a kohenes. So it's talking about the differences when it comes to details of mitzvahs, not when it comes to just general rules. This is like details of certain mitzvahs, how men do it differently than women. That's what it seems that the Mishnah is getting at. That certain mitzvahs are done, the way it's done is different. It deserves to be looked into, that why the Mishnah doesn't. It's the talk of a lot of commentaries. They try to discuss, they try to figure out how you could differentiate between these cases and the other laws. Because the Mishnah does mention about the law of betrothing one's daughter, the law of selling one's daughter as a slave. So you have to somehow say these are details of mitzvahs. They're not the actual obligation. I'm not exactly sure how to answer the question fully. How do you how you categorize it so perfectly that the Mishnah has to leave out certain laws and include some laws. I'll have to try to look into it a little more, how the commentaries specifically answer this question. But in general, that's the way they explain it, that there's a difference between the details of laws and just in general of a man is obligated in this mitzvah, a woman is not obligated in this mitzvah.
Rabbi,
yes,
it's pronounced betrothed with a soft th instead of betrothed.
Betrothed. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that, by the way, David, because this way, hopefully next time I won't make that mistake, especially to a less, to an audience that is bothered by that. Thank you. Appreciate that. No, I really do. Okay, so the Gemara, we're going to begin at the beginning of the Gemara, and I'm going to try to go through it. I know we did it, but it's you need to get the flow here. Okay, so let's begin at the Gemara. We're on page 23a, and we're starting, what is it, 15 lines from the bottom, maybe? 15, let's see, 5, 10, yeah, about 15 lines from the bottom of the page. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Kol Anasuis Lakuna, anyone who is married to a kohen, doesn't matter if they're a kohen, the daughter of a kohen, or they're the daughter of a Levite, or the daughter of an Israelite. They're married to a kohen. The brisa says, mincha and esrafais, their mincha is burned. But how is it burned? How is that so? All these three types, it doesn't matter. They're married to a kohen. It can't be eaten. Why can't the mincha be eaten? Meaning you take a kaimetz, burn it, and let the rest of the mincha, called the shirayim, the leftovers, why can't that be eaten? Mipnei, because every mincha of a kohen, of a wife of a kohen, the husband has some element of ownership there. What element of ownership does he have? Well, basically, someone who's married, the husband automatically has some ownership over her possessions. Whatever a woman owns is really owned by the husband. It might be atoning for her. It might be, it might be her voluntary gift, but the husband has some level of ownership of that. And because of that, you can't just say it's not a kohen's carbon. It has some type of, it's in some sense owned by a kohen, male kohen. It's true. Truthfully so, it's the woman's carbon. But there's some element that also makes it the husband's, and that makes it a male kohen's sacrifice. And because of that, we can't eat the leftovers. If it was just a woman's carbon, even if she's, if it was just a woman's carbon, totally a woman's, then you would say that the carbon could be eaten. The leftovers is eaten by the kohen. But because the husband has some ownership, doesn't matter how much, just in the sense that the husband owns the whatever the wife owns, he sort of owns. So because of that, the carbon cannot be eaten. It's totally burned. It can't be eaten. But he has a portion of it. But it also can't be totally burned without doing a commitment, but because she has a portion of it, and she is also considered an owner. She's in some sense because it's atoning for her, and so on. So you can't just you can't just so you can't just say that it's just a kaimetz. You can't just say that it's totally burned because she owns a portion of it. Rashi over here says it's lekaparasa hiba'a ve'ein mincha zara vaskain craven kolu blood kmitza. You can't just burn it because it's for her kapara. It's interesting the way Rashi seems to learn, maybe a little different than I said. I said that it doesn't matter how much the husband owns. maybe that's not perfect wording. Rashi seems to understand it that it's his. He owns it because he's the husband. He's the husband. He owns it. Of course, by a Sota, we know he's bringing it. But other karbanis that a female, a wife of a kohen a wife of a kohen brings, even if it's not a mincha Sota, the way Rashi seems to understand it is because he's the husband, he owns it completely. So maybe you can't say because even if he's a partial, he owns it completely. But because it's atoning for her, or it's bringing her, it's l'kaparasa hiba. Since it's for her, so therefore you have to say she has a certain level of bilos, of ownership of it. So maybe he's considered the full owner in regard to monetary laws, but she's considered the owner in regarding to the spiritual elements of it, that it's atoning for her. And so because of that, we can't do it like it's his. We can't do it like it's hers, because they both are some level of bilos, of ownership of it. And so the Brisa says, so what do you do? That you bring both. Both of them have to be brought as a sacrifice, so to speak. The kaimetz is brought on its own, by itself, and the shirayim are brought by themselves. After the kaimetz, the shirayim are brought. Now, the Gemara asks a question on this, and the Gemara says that how can you do that? So the Gemara asks this question, very strong question, that you normally can't do a bringing of one part of a korban, and then you decide to bring another part of that korban. Once one part is brought, the rest is not, you can't bring the remaining. There's a special law that we learned from Mimenu, that you can't bring stuff that's Mimenu, from something that a korban was brought. I gave an understanding, and I don't have a source, but I think this is the logic behind it. Sounds good, I think, that it's not honorable to bring something that's like a leftover part. So if you brought something as a korban, something that's left over, wouldn't be right to go and say, oh, you know what, I'm going to bring that as a korban. Don't bring leftovers. Leftovers, you want to have for dinner is one thing, but you don't bring them as a sacrifice. So this is something that's mimenu, that's from what was brought as a korban. You can't bring it as a korban. Whether that's the pshat or not, I'm not 100% sure, but that's it sounds like a good understanding of it. But it's a pasuk. The pasuk says you can't do it. You can't bring something that part of it was brought already as a sacrifice. You don't go and bring what's left, the remnants of it, as a sacrifice. So how can you do it here? We're going to say, oh, this is a unique case. It's a wife of a kohen, so it's not really her korban, it's not really his korban. You know what? We got to do some unique type of process of bringing this. Do the kaimetz, because the truth is it's hers. It has an element that's hers. It's atoning for her. Bring the kaimetz, the 3 fingers full. Okay, now we got to bring the rest of it because it's his. So bring the rest of it. So you brought hers part. Then you bring the rest, which is because it's his, because he's the owner. He's officially the owner. He's the kohen. Kohen's mincha meal offering has to be totally burned. We got to bring his. But you can't do that because there's a different problem. Mimenu, that you can't bring something that's a remnant of something else. You first brought a kohen, you can't now bring the rest. So what do you do? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. So Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, has some way of getting around this problem. You know what? Give it as if it's wood. Bring it as a sack. Bring it on the altar. Make it like consider it. Have in mind that it's wood, and therefore you did burn it. You did what a kohen needs to be done, but you don't have a problem of mimenu because you're basically burning it as if you're having in mind that it's wood, and therefore it's not a prohibition of bringing a remnants of a korban, because you're basically just bringing wood to burn. You don't bring remnants as a sacrifice, but to burn as wood, there's no prohibition of what, the wood. The wood, you brought some wood, you can bring more wood. If you cut down a tree and you took some of the wood for the altar, you can't cut down more of that same tree and bring it because mimenu. No, it doesn't. Mimenu is a part of a law of sacrificial parts, not the wood that's burning. So you don't have a problem of mimenu if you're bringing it as wood. And at the same time, you are fulfilling the obligation of burning it. Kololti, it has to be totally burned. Has to be totally burned. But you're having in mind that it's wood. It definitely is an interesting thing. It deserves to be looked into. How does this really work? Because isn't the mitzvah for a kohen to bring his sacrifice of a mincha, kolilti, totally burned as a sacrifice? So you're having in mind wood. Maybe you're not fulfilling maybe the obligation of bringing it as a sacrifice is not really fully being fulfilled. It's being brought on the altar, but the goal is that it should be as a sacrifice, and you're bringing it as wood. That's an interesting question that deserves to be looked into. How does this really work? I guess the understanding is that maybe the Gemara's understanding kolil ti, it's totally burned, means that it doesn't necessarily have to be considered like a korban. It just has to be burned. It's a special law. It has to be burned. The part of it is it's an interesting thing because what the kohen, none of it is brought as a sacrifice. It's like just the law of burning it. It deserves to be looked into how this really works. But the Gemara's thought is based on Rabbi Eliezer's view in another case, which we talked about yesterday, that Rabbi Eliezer holds when you have a mix-up of korban oila, korban chatos, you don't know which limb is what. So you burn them all on the altar. And there you have a problem because you're not supposed to be bringing limbs that are not meant to be brought on the altar as korbanos. You shouldn't be bringing them. So what do? Bring them all, but you have in mind that it's for the wood. In other words, you're using these to add as fuel. These are fuel for the flame. They're not the actual flame. The thing is, you could really differentiate. Maybe you could say that the fuel for this purpose, it works fine because the korban chatas is totally fuel. And based on my question before, it's not a perfect comparison because you really need to bring this as a sacrifice, kolultiya. For Rabbi Eliezer's case, maybe it works because you're at least burning it on the altar, and you're burning it on the altar, and you don't need to burn it on the altar at all, and you're just calling it fuel. Okay, so you burnt it on the altar as fuel. You didn't burn it as a korban. It doesn't need to be burnt as a korban. Here, you sort of need it as a korban, maybe. Yes, David.
He brings here from Rambam. He says in a case where one burned chametz or honey by itself on the altar, if one burned it only as firewood, he is exempt from punishment. Right. As although it is prohibited to burn these as an offering to Hashem, it's permitted to burn them as firewood. Right. Which is very nice, but I don't see it as an answer to my question. My question is that if the kohen's mincha, meal offering, is supposed to be a sacrifice, so when the kohen brings it and has in mind fuel, does the kohen really fulfill his obligation as bringing it as a sacrifice? Meaning here you have an extra element that you don't have in your example of bringing honey on the altar, or whatever the example was, leaven on the altar. Over there, you don't need to bring it as a sacrifice. You're bringing it as fuel, and you don't need to bring it as a sacrifice. So perfect, you made it as fuel. It's fuel. It's good. But here you have another ingredient that's necessary, and that is that it's supposed to be a sacrifice. So you're having in mind that you're bringing it as fuel. Okay, so is that fulfilling the obligation of the fact that it's supposed to be a sacrifice? That here we have this strange problem. We have this issue. It's not a common issue. It's a unique case. It's a meal offering that's owned by the husband, who's a kohen, and his wife, who doesn't matter what she is, but she's the wife. She's a woman who automatically makes it that she's not supposed to have her korban totally burned. But the fact that her husband's a kohen means that it should be totally burned. So there's an ingredient here that we have to fulfill, and that is that the meal offering has to be a korban. So does it help when you have in mind l'shometzim, you're having in mind fuel, if you're supposed to be bringing it as a korban? And it sounds to me like maybe they understand that maybe there's no obligation. Maybe they're understanding the obligation of the kohen's korban, not that it's not really a sacrifice. It's more of a fuel offering. That doesn't sound right. In other words, the way I'm trying to answer it, which doesn't sound correct, is that there's two parts to the kohen's meal offering. One part is the stuff that's supposed to be brought as a sacrifice, which is like by any Israelite's korban, which is the kamitza, which is the 3 fingers full, even though you didn't divide it. But the fact is, part of it is a korban, and the rest of it just has to be burned, almost like it's not a sacrificial obligation. It's more of the fact that it has to be burned on the altar with no kavana, no intent necessary. So you have in mind that you bring the kaimet, the part of it is meant to be a sacrifice, but the rest of it is just a special law that a kohen's korban is totally burned. You don't just go and divide it. It gets totally burned. In a certain sense, like there's 2 laws. Again, this was just a thought that would help us answer this question, and that really you don't need the rest to have in mind for the korban, for the meal off, that the kohen's korban has to totally be burned. All of it is a sacrifice. No. Part of it is a sacrifice. That's good. The rest of it is not necessary to be a sacrifice. It has to be burned on the altar for whatever reason. That's the mitzvah and the Torah. It has to be burned. The kohen's is unique. It has to all be burned, and that's how the Gemara can compare it to this case, that it has to be burned. It could be fuel. You could burn it as fuel. Fine. It has to be burned. You want to have in mind fuel? No problem. And then you don't have the problem of the shiraim. Anyway, it's just a thought that comes to my mind. I'm not sure that it's correct, but it's to answer this question that I have. Okay, anyway, we'll have to look up and see if any commentaries mention anything about this. Now, the Gemara continues and says, this sounds good, according to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer has this opinion about his case, that you could do things that you could, it's sort of like a loophole, that you could burn something on the altar, but it's not a sacrifice, it's fuel. You call it fuel, and then you get around different problems. So that goes good according to his opinion. The rabbis don't agree to this type of principle, and they forbid offering things for the other parts for the sake of firewood. What their reason is, I wonder what their reason is. What the reason of the rabbis? They don't agree with this. Like, they don't agree with this type of loophole. They hold that you have to, you let it stay overnight and it becomes invalid. But why don't they like his loophole? It sounds like a good loophole. Rashi says it's a Gemara in Zvachim. I guess we got to look it up there. Okay. But deserves to be looked into. What's the reason of the rabbis? Let me just write down, so I'll look it up. Okay, now, so the Gemara says, what about the rabbis? What are they going to do? How are they going to, what do they do with the korban mincha? That's a kohen's and his wife's. What do you do with such a korban? In other words, it's really his wife's, but we call it the kohen's because he's the official owner. Everything that a woman owns, her husband owns. And, seemingly, that's the understanding here, and therefore the husband is an owner, is a partial owner, and she's a partial owner because it's spiritually hers. It's going to her benefit, either atonement. So basically,
what do you do? What do the rabbis do in such a case? You have to burn. On the one hand, you have to burn only the kmitza and let the rest be eaten. On the other hand, you have to burn the whole thing because it's a kain's. So you have both the. So what are the rabbis going to do? Well, Rabbi Eliezer, you have a loophole. You could burn part and burn the other part, and the other part you have in mind for firewood, for fuel. Okay, but what about the rabbis? What are they going to do? They don't agree in the other case. They disagree with this concept of burning something for fuel. So the Gemara answers that there is another opinion that they might follow that comes up, that Shimon, the rabbis will follow this opinion of Rebbe Elazar Reb Shimon. A different you got to remember there's two names very similar here. There's a Rebbe Eliezer and then there's a Rebbe Elazar Reb Shimon. So they're two separate people, two totally different opinions. The first opinion we were talking about is Rebbe Eliezer. Now we got Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon. The Tanya, because it's talking about Bryce, Rebbe Shimon Omer, Elazar, the son of Rebbe Shimon, says, that you have the kaimetz brought on its own. In the shirayim, the leftovers, you burn them. They're scattered. They're mispazrim. They're distributed. They're scattered on the base hadeshen, on the ash heap. So there was an ash heap right outside of the mizbeach, meaning right on the east side, where they would put the deshen, the ashes. Trumas hadeshen was brought and placed right next to the mizbeach. Eitzalam is samei eitzalam mizbeach. If you remember from Karbonis this morning, when you recite the Karbonis, so the pasuk says over there in the Karbonis, we say it every day. V'heirem es hadeshen asher toichal ha'esh. He should take lift up the ashes that the fire consumed, es ha'oila, from the daily offering, the oila, al hamizbeach, on the altar. V'samai eitzel hamizbeach, and he places it next to the mizbeach. So there's an ash heap right next to the mizbeach, and that ash heap is what you do with the shirayim of the. You do that with the shirayim of the mincha. So what are you basically doing? You can't eat it, so you scatter it on the ashes, which are placed right next to the mizbeach. Now, what is Rebbe Elazar Reb Shimon's case? So if we look in Rashi, the bottom Rashi here, Rebbe Elazar Reb Shimon, Menachas Parakelo, Menachas Gabi, Minchas Choite, by a Minchas Choite, which is, I mentioned it yesterday, we're dealing with a carbon oila v'yorid. This is a carbon that depends on the person's financial status. And he sinned. There's three sins that depend on a person's financial status that we call carbon oila v'yorid. Those three sins, one of them is if he knows testimony and he says he doesn't know testimony. The other one is he swears falsely, and the other one is regular swearing. In other words, one is about testimony, one is about just a regular shavua, and the third one is tumas migdash v'kodshav. So here Rashi brings them. He says this is talking about a kohen maybe al shvias koil, either because he heard something, meaning testimony, and he refused to testify, or in a regular vow that he transgressed, so or saying what should I say, desecrated by making impure the migdash or kodshim, if he made them impure. So all of these three things are cases where there's three levels of the depending on a person's wealth, three levels of atonement, different sacrifices. You have expensive sacrifice, a medium sacrifice, or a real cheap sacrifice. So the Badali Dallas, the lowest of the low, the poor of the poor, poverty-stricken, so they bring the mincha, meal offering. It's a sacrifice of meal, of just not a bird and not an animal. It's a meal offering. The rabbis argue with Reb Shimon, and they say that they discuss what's done with this mincha, with this meal offering of a kohen. So the kohen sinned. What does he do with his mincha? So they argue with Reb Shimon, and they say that it's ka mincha, like a mincha, minchas chayvase shel koyin kolil kiminchas nidvasai ve'ena nikmetzes. They argue with Reb Shimon, and they say that there's no you don't separate it. There's no just 1 second. I see the Bach here changes some things around. Ve'ena nikmetzes, you don't do kamitza. You don't do a kamitza on it. You don't do the 3 fingers full. They say that that you basically just burn the whole thing because it's like a mincha of a kohen. So in other words, the kohen sinned. What do you do with this? This is not the typical mincha. This is a mincha meal offering of a korban of a but it's a kohen did the sin. So what happens there? So does the kohen bring it like an Israelite, or does the kohen bring it like a kohen? So it says v'haisa la kohen kamincha. So it has an interesting term that the verse uses. It's like the mincha. So what does that mean? So like the mincha that he's obligated to bring, that you don't even do a kamitza on. You don't even do now. V'amar Reb Shimon, and Reb Shimon says that kamincha shal Yisrael, like a mincha of a Yisrael. I'm just reading the Bach's the way he's wording it. Kaminchas Yisrael, kamincha shal Yisrael. Ma shel Yisrael nikmetzes af minchas choyte shel kohen nikmetzes af minchas shel kohen. So the minchas chayva of a kohen is also you do kamitza, and then he says ima minchas Yisrael shiarena cholen. Maybe the leftover should be eaten just like a mincha of Yisrael. Avzu shiarena cholen. Talmud loymar. The pasuk says vaisel kohen kamincha, but kohen kamincha leinyan avodas kohen. It's like a mincha regarding his service, the work of the kohen, that shatuna kamitza, that you have to do the kamitza, but veloy leishim klal, but it totally doesn't get burned. You do kamincha like a mincha haketza. So how do you do it? Hakarv kamar latzu yishraim craven la'atzmam. No, veloy leishim klal. No, let's read it. So v'loy leishim kamincha, but it's not like a fire like a mincha. Okay, it's a carve lots of Asherim, lots of blessed like kol shemimenu leishim klal. He doesn't hold of leisha. He doesn't hold of this kol shemimenu leishim. He has no problem doing both on the mizbeach, and that's Reb Shimon's opinion. And Reb Elazar, Reb Shimon, Palagale, and Reb Elazar, Reb Shimon argues on that. The Amar, and he says, so here you have Reb Shimon's view himself. Reb Shimon has no problem about burning both on the altar, and Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon argues on that. And Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says the kamitz is karbatzmei, the shirayim are scattered on the Beis Hadeshin. Let me clarify what I just said, what I just read in Rashi. Rashi says there's 3 opinions over here. There's the opinion of the rabbis. The rabbis say, what do you do with this mincha of the kohen? The mincha of the kohen, that's a sin offering that he did one of these 3 sins. So the kohen is the one who did it. If an Israelite did it, of course, it has separate laws. It has the law regular meal offering. There's kometz and there's the shirayim. But the kohen is different. The kohen has special laws when he brings a korban. And so here, so they learn from the pasuk and from the way the wording of the pasuk, that the kohen, and they argue about the meaning of this pasuk, but basically the rabbis hold that the mincha, the meal offering that the kohen is bringing for one of these 3 sins, the rabbis say just burn it entirely, in its entirety, just like a regular meal offering of a kohen. That's the rabbi's opinion. Reb Shimon, do it like it should be done, meaning do the kometz, and then, because he's a kohen, burn the rest also on the altar, no problem. And seemingly it's because Reb Shimon himself, we just seemingly the Reb Shimon doesn't have a problem of bringing 2 things. The way Rashi explained it, it seems like Reb Shimon doesn't hold of this prohibition of kometz, of bringing one thing and then bringing something else on the altar. You can do both on the altar. That's Reb Shimon's opinion. Reb Elazar Reb Shimon argues. He says, no,
The koimetz you bring, you do separate the koimetz, and the rest of it you spill on the Beis Hadeshen, on the ash heap. So that's what the Gemara is thinking, that maybe that's what the opinion, that's what we'll do for a mincha of a kohenes. The same law should apply a mincha of a wife of a kohen. Do the same thing that we do for the kohen's sin offering for those 3 sins. But we'll do the same for the wife of a kohen. You do the koimetz, and then the rest you just spill on the Beis Hadeshen, on the ash heap. Okay, now we turn the page. We're on page 23b. Even the rabbis don't argue on Reb Lazar Reb Shimon only in a case by the mincha of a sin offering of the kohenim of those 3 sins, the bas hakravahi, because in that case it deserves to be brought. It's qualified to be brought for an offering, based on the way they understand the pasuk, and because they compare it to a kohen, a kohen's obligatory offering is compared to his voluntary offering that you don't need to do kmitza. But here, by a female, the wife of a kohen, here aval baha. Here the rabbis will agree with this Reb Elazar Reb Shimon, the son of Reb Shimon, that the koimetz can be burned on the altar, but the rest is a big problem to burn on the altar. But here they'll agree, because you can't bring it on the altar. You're going to have a problem of bringing something and then bring the rest on the altar. You can't bring remnants on the altar. So therefore, the rabbis will agree with Reb Elazar, Reb Shimon, that you scatter them on the ash heap. Now, the problem here, and this is a big problem, is, but does that fulfill the obligation? If we look at it as if it's the kohen's, so how do you really fulfill the obligation by throwing it on the ash heap? Is that a fulfillment of a kohen's burning of the ashes of his korban? It has to be burned, but doesn't it have to be burned on the altar? How does it help if you burn it on the ash heap? This, it seems like there's no other option. Very interesting. How do you fulfill that? According to what I explained before, maybe you could say the same answer, that the remnants of the kohen's korban is more of an obligation to burn it rather than as a sacrifice. So because it doesn't have to be burned, because it's more of an obligation of burning, so if it's burned, right next to the altar, that's fulfillment of the kohen kol tia. You're not taking it away. It's right by the altar. You're burning it by the altar, not exactly on the altar, but it's kol tia. It's burned, and it's not necessary to be a sacrifice. So if you burn it right there, it's interesting. I don't know what the law would be if you burned it somewhere else, but it's mispazer al Beis Hadeshen. It sounds like that is good enough. What about burning it somewhere else? According to my logic, maybe that should also be good enough. Again, this is a scenario where the Gemara seems to say that it's fine, that you're somehow fulfilling the kohen's obligation. In any event, that's the way the Gemara answers it. We're going to continue. We have the next Gemara talks about the daughter of a Yisrael who's married to a kohen. Bas Yisrael Hanasua. She's married to a kohen. So it talked about her mincha being burned. What about a kohenes married to an Israelite? Her mincha is eaten. Now, my time, what's the reason? So the Gemara says, Damakra, because the pasuk says, "Chol minchas kohen kol tia lo siyachal." A mincha of a kohen v'loy kohenes, not a kohenes, meaning a daughter of a kohen
her mincha doesn't have this special law. It's only the daughter, or it's only the kohen himself, not the daughter of a kohen. A female kohen doesn't have this law. Kohenes mischalelas, kohen ein mischalel. Then the Mishnah said another interesting law, that when a female kohen marries someone she can't, she becomes a chalala, prohibited to marry a kohen. If a kohen marries someone he can't, he does not lose his potential of being a kohen. She loses her potential of being a kohen when she marries someone she's not allowed to. He doesn't. And so, for example, when a kohen is married to a divorcee, he's not allowed to be married to a divorcee. And we don't treat him like a kohen while he's married, but when he gets divorced or when she dies, we will give him a kohen aliyah. He doesn't become a cholol. He doesn't become a permanent cholol. He doesn't lose his kahuna. He stays a kohen. A female kohenes who marries someone has relations with someone she's not allowed to, she becomes permanently prohibited from ever marrying a kohen. She's called a chalola. So the Gemara asks Minolan, how do we know this law? The Amar Kwek, the pasuk says that a kohen shouldn't ruin it for his kids. He shouldn't profane his kids amongst his people. So the understanding is he's going to ruin it for his kids, but not for himself. His kids will get ruined from kahuna, but he won't. So when he marries a divorcee, he has children. The children are no longer kohanim. He was not allowed to be married to her. These are children from a divorcee and a kohen. The children are Israelites. He doesn't lose his kahuna permanently, but the kids do. He ruins it for his kids, and that's hinted from the verse that he shouldn't do it to his kids. The next statement in the Mishnah, kohenes mitama, a kohenes may contaminate herself with tuma, but a kohen can't. Meaning, she can go to a cemetery, she can go to a funeral. She's the daughter of a kohen. She's allowed to go, but the kohen himself, a kohen can't. My time, what's the reason? Because the pasuk says, "Emer ela kohenim b'nei Aaron." It says, "Speak to the kohenim, the children of Aaron, the sons of Aaron, not the daughters. B'nei Aaron, but nice Aaron, not the daughters of Aaron." Then it says, "Kohen eichel b'kodshei kodshim." A kohen can eat of holy, special, extra holy items, but a kohenes can't. She can eat of the kohen, of the kodshim kalim, light level kodshim, holy things, but not high level kodshim. Kohen can eat even from the high level kodshim, a chatos, an osham, a shalmei tzibor. The kohen himself can eat, not a female kohen. Why the chsiv? How do we? What's the reason? The chsiv, because it says kol zocher b'nei Aaron yachlana. Any male of the kohenim can eat it, not a female. Then it says ma bein ish. What's the difference between a male and a female? And we mentioned that there's a difference when it comes to the mitzayra. Male has to let his hair grow. He's a mitzayra, has tzaras, leprosy. He has to let his hair grow. But a female doesn't have to let her hair grow. He has to rend his garments. She doesn't have to rend her garments. One of the rabbis taught in Brisa, ish, ein liyela ish. The rabbis taught in Brisa that it says a man that he's afflicted, he's with tzaras, ein liyela ish. All I know is a male. Isha minayin. How do we know about a female being afflicted with tzaras? Kishuam revatzura asher boy. When it says the tsarua, the one who's afflicted with tsaras, that asher bayir knows that's afflicted with it. So the garments are torn and the hair you let grow. So harekan shnayim, we have two people seemingly mentioned here. It says ish and then it says tsarua, which seemingly means a man and a woman. In other words, why does it mention tsarua? Could have just left it out. It says tsarua like another type of person. There's an ish person and then there's a tsarua. So probably it's referring to a female. So imkain matam alaymer ish. So why does it say ish then if it's male and female? So the answer is le'inyan shalamata, because it's telling you that there are some laws, the laws that it mentions later, that will only apply to the male and not the female. The laws of Taras apply to everyone, but the specific detail of the what's done when after you have Taras, that you have to let your hair grow and you let you rend your garments. That's only a ish and not an isha. Linyan shalamata ish pereyochu. Then it mentions about a male making his son a nazir. So it says, so ish madas b'nai b'nazir ve'ino isha maderes b'no b'nazir. Male can vow his son a nazir, but a female can't vow her son into nazirus. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, how do we know this? So Rabbi Yochanan says there's no source written, but it's a halacha. Halacha hi b'nazir. It's like a halacha l'moshe misinai. It is a halacha l'moshe misinai that this is the law. Now it says, so ish megaleach al nazirus aviv. A man shaves for his father's nazirus. What does that mean? It doesn't mean he shaves for his father's nazirus, but that's what it sounds like. It means he can, for his shaving that he does at the end of his nazirus, he can use his father's sacrifices. So he's megaleach al nazirus aviv, on the sacrifices of his father's nazirus, but a woman can't use her father's sacrifices. This is also a halacha l'moshe misinai, that this could be done. This is not based on a pasuk. It's a halacha l'moshe misinai, and that the man could use his father's sacrifices. And we mentioned that there's two ways how this is possible, different opinions in the Gemara and Nazir, how it works, but it's not the topic of our discussion here. It's just mentioning there's a difference between the man, and the woman, because the son can use his father's sacrifices. The daughter, who was a Nazirah, let's say, can't use her father's sacrifices. It's the halacha l'moshe misinai. Ha'ish mekadesh es bito ve'isha mekadesh es bita. The man can betroth his daughter, but a woman cannot betroth her daughter. Kislev, how do we know that? It says, it says in the pasuk, I gave my daughter to this man, which means that the father has the right, when his daughter is below the age of 12 and a half, boigeres, under the age of boigeres, even when she's a naira, he can marry her off. He can marry off his daughter, even though she's bas mitzvah already. But she's not yet a boigeres, which is 12 and a half. 12 is bas mitzvah's naira. 12 and a half is boigeres. Till she's boigeres, he can marry her off. It says, I gave my daughter to this man, and he has the right over his daughter to marry her to who he wishes, and it's considered a valid marriage biblically. How do you know a man can sell his daughter as a female slave, and the wife can't? Because it says, it says in the pasuk, a man can sell his daughter. It doesn't say a woman. Now we get into the discussion of skila, the stoning, if it's done clothed or unclothed. And here we have the male is unclothed and the female is clothed when she's stoned. My time, what's the reason? It says they shall stone him. My oisai, what does it say? Oisai, which is extra. It doesn't have to say oisai. So it says my oisai. Maybe it's trying to tell you him and not her, that they stone him and they don't stone a female. But this pasuk says you do stone a female. So a female is stoned. So rather, the meaning is that it's oisai, him, you do it naked. Besides, they do cover his private area, but besides that, he's naked. But her, you don't do naked. Now, a man is hanged, but a female is not hanged. My time, what's the reason? Because the pasuk says, you hang him on after someone's stoned, they hang him for a short time, and then they quickly take him down before it gets dark. They have to take him off the gallows. So it says the man is hanged,
but not the woman, because the pasuk says you hang him and him and not her. It says him. A man is sold when he steals and he has no money to pay. A female is not sold when she steals. The pasuk says, what's the reason? My timer. What's the reason? The pasuk says that he is sold in his stealing, in his theft. In his, but not in hers. So the understanding is that it excludes a female from being sold when she steals and she has no money to pay. Hadran Allah Haya Noitel, may you return to us this chapter Haya Noitel. Okay, have a Freilich and Chanukah, Sei gesund, everyone. And you're all invited to come tomorrow to the klezmer and cheese and wine tasting for free, you and your spouses. Sei gesund, have a Freilich and Chanukah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Tonight there is a class. There is a class, Rabbi Citron. Sei gesund.